everybody. It is Jason White, Into the Fire, coming to you live from Tulsa, Oklahoma. The date, I can't remember man, I've had such a crazy day today. I think today is the 26th or the 27th of June, 2025, and it is a pleasure to be here. What a week. And hello to everybody, all of our faithful that's here. I see Jackie in the audience. I see a lot of people in here. I want to say that, first of all, I want to make mention that our prayers and thoughts are with Phyllis. Unfortunately, her husband lost his fight with cancer, and that happened within the week. And I was definitely sad to hear that. And so she's definitely here virtually each and every week. And I'd gotten messages from several of the other viewers to make sure that I was aware of it, and very, very sad. So hopefully she's doing okay, all things considered, and definitely keep her in your thoughts and prayers. Tonight we got Christine Burke. She's a forensic genealogist and a forensic investigative genetic genealogist, and an author, and somebody that I think owns this company. And one of my very few, actually, I think she's the only guest that I've had that's actually sent me some swag, which I love that. And so it's going to be a fun time talking to her. Let's see what else has happened in the week. Boy, there's just so much stuff. I don't even know. It's been a busy day for me. Of course, when I hear that Metro Shoes is going out of business, my wife's going nuts, and we had to run up there to go look at some shoes and get some for the grandson. And so next week, I just wanted to tell you, next week is going to be, I think it's July 4th is Friday. So we're not going to have a live episode next week, and I don't want to throw a pre-recorded up on that date. So what we will do is I'm going to re-air an episode, and I haven't decided quite what that's going to be. But anyway, and plus I'm going to be out of the state anyway. I'm going to be in the great state of Arizona, and I'm looking forward to that. So that's where I will be. Anyway, it's going to be a good episode tonight. I don't want to waste any time. I want to tell you a little bit about our guest tonight. She's going to have the floor to talk about whatever she wants, but she's living in Scottsdale, Arizona. And give me a quick minute. The shirt that I'm wearing tonight also is a little bit of swag too. That's Mr. Weiss. He's retired NYPD Highway Patrol. I bet you've never heard of that unless I mentioned it before, but he sent me this shirt. It's an NYPD Highway Patrol shirt. I did notice on KGRH's website, I happened to be looking around there and prowling around, and I noticed that they were starting to put up some swag and some merchandise that they're starting to sell for some of the other shows. Ours isn't up yet, but I like the way it looks. It looks great. So that's coming in the near future. And the other thing I wanted to mention that I think is really, really cool is that my Facebook ban on my Detective Jason White Facebook page, they never lifted it. It's just that they completely deleted my page. So I was able to get right back on there and create another one. So I do have a Detective Jason White Facebook page that I have plenty of room for as many people that wants to join on there. And the reason why I have that site, it's because I keep posting. I will put postings up in reference to where I'm speaking and things along that nature. And believe it or not, I've actually got contacted by several people over the last couple of years in reference to speaking engagements because of that. So anyway, that'll be fun and so forth. I'm kind of doing a little stall tactic here to get to where I needed to be. So give me 1 second. I apologize. I had it up a second ago and it disappeared on me. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed a lot of the content that I've brought you your way here in the recent past with Larry Wilcox. And, that's pretty cool to have somebody from CHIPS come on here, as well as I hope you enjoyed the break of Steve-O. There's somebody else that I'm kind of actually speaking with just for later on down the line that might break it up. And just to give you an idea as to who this person is, he actually was a member of the Ozzy Osbourne band, Whitesnake, Quiet Riot, things like that. So he is a huge huge musician and somebody that I think is just a really interesting guy. Give me a quick second. I'm sorry. I got to find this real quick. I'm so sorry. I had some technical difficulties earlier. Go figure. And I was rushing around. So just give me a quick second. No, here it is, right in front of my face where I had it all the time. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about this guest. She basically, what her current focus is that she helps the police find persons of interest using genetic genealogy. Probably the most famous case to date is going to be the Golden State Killer, who was a serial killer, serial rapist in the Sacramento area. Believe it or not, he was actually a police officer to boot. And that's probably the biggest one. I'd say that most recently in the news is real recent. The two cases that come to mind is that Idaho killer that basically killed those 4 individuals that were going to that university in Idaho. And then the other one that's even more recent than that is the Gigolo Beach serial killer, also known as the Long Island serial killer. I can't remember his name, but that's another one that's really recent. And I think this is going to be fascinating. So she's most known for, and this is pretty interesting, she's most known for a solve that she was able to do in 48 hours to solve a 31-year-old cold case using forensic genealogy. And she was able to find the bio family for civilians in as little as an hour. So individuals that I guess that are adopted and so forth, she has been able to. I say has been. I wouldn't say that she's able to do that each and every time because each one has its own complexities. Basically, her focus is on identifying the over 15,000 unidentified human remains cases in the United States and clearing the estimated over 250,000 cold cases across the United States and others across the world. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, this is going to be a fantastic night in talking about this science. I get a lot of people that call me or they reach out to me via email, et cetera. And they're like, boy, I really wish that there was something that I can do, but I'm too old. This is probably one of those things that is one of those sciences or one of those areas that you could get involved in that essentially you could get involved in regardless of what your age is. And so she is a forensic genetic genealogist, court qualified, law enforcement expert, witness, police. She's a witness when it comes to police policy, procedure, and culture. She's also involved in the International Association Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Training, and POST. She's a POST instructor. That's really throughout the country. POST is like they're the certifying agency, or they're basically, I don't do POST. We don't do POST here. We have CLEAT, which is a different deal, but basically they certify the training that we do, et cetera, and make sure that we have training. So she's an instructor there, as well as a private investigator and she owns the agency for that. She lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she had, and we're going to get into this because I really want to talk about this. She had a non-paternal event, and so hang on, we're going to get into that. That means that this is what it really means. She'll explain that. But she found out through DNA testing that who she thought was her dad was actually not her dad. And that's going to be interesting. So I would definitely want to get into that. And we'll get into much more. I want to bring Christine on. Welcome, Christine.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jason. I'm really excited to be here. Plenty to talk about. Yeah,
I know.
Plenty to talk about, like you said.
I've been rambling on. Christine goes, "Is this live?" And I was like, "Absolutely, it's live." And so she was like,
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
And I'm glad you like the
swag. Yes.
I love it.
And before I forget, because I can forget easily, you mentioned something about the forensic genetic genealogy, and this is absolutely something that those of us who are experienced can do at any age, right? I have several students that are in their 70s and above that work and learn how to do this. So as long as you have a passion and desire to help, I love that, right? Nobody should be precluded from doing this work. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Well, let's start off with, and it's true, because this is one of those areas that's kind of unique, that people could be theoretically involved in the criminal justice world at any age, honestly, at any age. I mean, of course, there's a lot of training that goes with it. And so let me ask you something. Well, first of all, I got to tell you this too. I just recently sat through an 8-hour genetic genealogy class, which means really nothing. It doesn't mean that I'm able to do it by any stretch. I felt like I was sitting through a class that was, they could have titled it Russian. I'll tell you what, that's some complicated stuff that you're dealing with for sure. And it's not just really just simply researching a little here and there, and it just falls into place. You've got to do a lot of digging. And so anyway, I want to ask you, how did you get involved and interested in this field to begin with?
Well, it goes to the DNA test that I took, right? And we'll just say at a ripe old age, a DNA test revealed that I wasn't who I thought I was. And neither was my mom. Okay. When this test came back, I lost 75% of my family as I knew it. My mom's dad was not her dad. My dad was not my dad. Now, I never knew my dad growing up. So, I just never really thought about it. And what happened was my aunt showed up as my cousin, who I thought was my aunt. And so the discovery really started on my mom's side. And one of the things in the genetic genealogy world is, especially as cops dealing with records and different things, we'll talk about the science. You have to put your mind out there of the possibilities, right? So it was never a possibility to me growing up. I knew everything. I had traveled around the world, going to all the places where my family grew up. And it just wasn't a possibility that I wasn't who I thought I was. And it really shook me, right? Being a cop and having certainty and control over your life and everything. So it started with my mom. And when my cousin, my aunt turned up to be my cousin in the DNA testing, and I reached out to my cousin, her daughter, and I said, is there something going on that I don't know about? And of course, this is the pat answer. She says, the test is wrong. Of course, the test is wrong. And as cops, we know DNA is always right. Okay. So that's what started it. I really didn't know anything about it. I had taken a test back in 2013. I did 23andMe for the medical stuff. And it was just floating out there. And so, now I had this conundrum, but as you were mentioning in the training, I didn't understand what anything was. I just thought that the list was out there. It's kind of like an email list. You get these matches back. And I don't know, I guess I just thought it was going to do itself, and it didn't. And so when this came about with my mom, I started having to learn what centimorgans were and how you measure this, and a foreign language, so to speak. And then one day, I remember it not too long ago, it was in May 2017, I sat up in bed in the middle of the night and I said, oh my goodness, it's me too. And I went in and I went and looked at the match list, and there was not a Burke out of, thousands and thousands of matches. There was not a Burke in there. And I called it was FTDNA, and I called and I said, am I crazy? Right? Your gut, you talk about your gut. I said, am I crazy? Because I think something's wrong here. Mm-hmm. And that set me on my path. And
well, just incidentally, I mean, did you submit your DNA because you suspected that you weren't a part of I mean, did you have some suspicions, or was it just like, oh my gosh, just out of the clear blue?
Well, that's a bigger story for another podcast episode. But because I was looking for relatives. Okay. But when I, in the back of my mind, but I was doing it for the medical information because my mom didn't like doctors. We had breast cancer in the family, and They said, we'll just do the test, and that came back negative. And so I was good. I really never thought anything would come of this. So, yeah. So
you get involved in it that way. You're sitting there, you're researching this stuff, and then you're like, okay, I really want to get more involved in this. So when did the world of forensic genealogy officially come about? Because I may be I think it's relatively new,
It is.
yeah.
Yeah, so this all started in 2017. My mom had dementia at the time, and so it was just my mom and I. So I didn't have anybody to share this with. And when I tell you, folks that go through this, if you don't know somebody that's going through this, like, it rocked my world. I still have the weight and all the. It's just really challenging. You don't realize how important your identity is to you. And so I was really determined to figure it out. And friends and family said, well, come on, you know who you are. And I said, no. Like, it rocks you at your core. And so I said, okay, I have to figure this out. I paid some of the experts. I would mention well-known experts. And they said, well, you'll just have to wait for a bigger match. And the cop in me is like, no, like, that's not going to happen. We're going to do whatever we can do. And so I set about learning, and I took about 3 years, a lot of foot stomping, a lot of God, why me? Didn't have a great childhood. And then I figured it out, right? And I started helping people finding their family in as little as an hour. And I was like, man, this is like crazy. My cops need this. And I realized, instead of saying, why me? Why not me? And as you mentioned about my background, being a law enforcement trainer and having been a detective, and all these points led me to right where I was. And so in May of 2021, I launched Genetic Genealogy for Law Enforcement, training the police to bring this technology in-house. That's how it started.
And then so you start getting involved. You start doing that, and then I take it that there was some certifications. What does it take for somebody to actually become a forensic genealogist? I mean, a genealogist, I guess anybody could say they're a genealogist, so to speak, right?
Well, yeah, that's a big topic. Some people believe that you need, college certifications and different things. My stance, right, as you mentioned, I'm a court qualified expert, and I don't have a special doodad for that. I have experience, right, that's qualified from the court, and so my belief is having the proof and having the experience. And being able to go in and prove it, have results, and defend it in court. And that's something else that's really important in these cases. You brought up Koberger, which I would love to talk about. So there's nothing special about it. Once you understand the science, and I was going to say it's easy to me now, because the DNA just leads the way. It's either there or it's not there. And once you learn how to interpret it and apply it, that's it. And it's the most amazing thing. It's just the best thing, that something so tragic is the best thing that ever happened to me. I love it. Yeah.
And rarely do I speak to the guests before I get them on here. So sometimes I throw you questions, and if you don't know, you don't know. But I want you. I'm curious, just for the listener or the watcher of this episode. Can you just briefly talk a little bit about the history of how they identified the Golden State Killer? Because that's kind of there wasn't the rules that exist today back then, and how that genealogist kind of went about identifying that person.
Well, I've heard some things. I don't have firsthand knowledge of how that happened. We have guidelines now, perspectives, right? And so do you want to talk about a little bit about the difference in the science first, like where we're at between CODIS and, okay. So the biggest system that we have, just to speak to the public, the main tools, and this is why it's my belief, and this is why I started with law enforcement, this should be one of the tools on the tool belt, or in the toolkit, like APHIS, which does your fingerprints, NIBIN, which does the gun and the brass, right, tracks that. And we have CODIS, which does a test called STR, which is short tandem repeat. And that's a huge system. We've got that all over the country, but it only reads a portion of the genome. And the genome, as I like to explain it, is actually the blueprint. If you think about a house blueprint, And you can look at a house blueprint and it talks about what the house is built with, what the roof looks like, maybe the landscaping and the plants. Well, your genome, your human genome, talks about everything in your blueprint, what color your hair is, what color your eyes are, how tall you are. And so when you do genetic genealogy, you're basically outputting the entire genome. And so that's the difference between CODIS and whole genome sequencing or microarray or whatever. So you're using more of the entire blueprint. And unfortunately, the systems don't necessarily talk to each other. Okay, so when there's a case, there has to be more DNA pulled. It has to be able to be output in a certain fashion. It has to be read and converted through the computer. The matches get output, and then it goes that way. So CODIS is more of a one-to-one match. Okay, the people are in the database, and we put the suspect in there, and we can sometimes get a little close, like familial, really close relative, but typically it has to be one-to-one. With forensic genetic genealogy or whole genome sequencing, I don't need the person. And this is where it's so amazing, because all I need is distant relatives, and I can find out who the person is. And I don't even need to, in many cases, get all the way down to the person, because I'm sure if you've worked cases and how horrific it is when you have to go and tell a family, I don't have anything to go on. I've got absolutely nothing. And it sucks. Pardon my French, right? But it sucks.
Yeah.
And with forensic genetic genealogy and whole genome sequencing, we can get these matches and we can get the names. So almost immediately, you have a pool of family of potential suspects that we can work and then narrow down, right? You've got regions of the country, and I can't say amazing enough at all the possibilities that we can do. We could even do stuff with STR when you get YSTR and haplogroups, which is something, you mentioned the cold case that I solved, and we can talk about that. But this is why this is completely different, because it doesn't have to be one-to-one. A lot of the problems that we have, like with our unknown humans, and just interrupt me if you want, but our unknown humans, which is a horrific number, and with that, because of some of the ages and things like that, they're just not in there, and majority of the people are not in CODIS, thank God. So we just don't have a match pool to be able to do anything with it. And that's why, to be the one-to-one match. And that's why the forensic genetic genealogy is so different.
Well, in reference to, this is what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong at any point, because I'm sure you probably hear a lot of the different cases that are starting, because this is starting to hit courtrooms, and in the Idaho case, which you're going to address here shortly, because I really want to talk about that too. But I had heard with the Golden State Killer that what had happened was, when they were kind of looking around at it, they had the DNA. And so I think that the genealogist, like I said, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they submitted it to 23andMe as if it was their own DNA to see what it would show. Is that, have you heard that? Or
I thought it was MyHeritage. I'm not sure if it was 23andMe, but yeah, there's
which in now they're kind of like, oh, no, time out. You can't do that. And because those databases like MyHeritage, 23andMe, all of the biggies, the big ones, all of those, they kind of have something stated in there that this isn't for law enforcement purposes, or unless they opt into that, right?
Well, and it's a really complicated issue, right? We can talk about it for several reasons. If you want to do this, and people, and especially we've got the issue with what happened with 23andMe, right? So there's a lot of tangents, but with the databases, they're only terms and conditions, right? So those are private companies, right? So CODIS being maintained by the government and all that, like NCIC and the fingerprint records and things like that. These databases are operated by public companies, right? So you as a company, anybody that has a company, you set your own terms and conditions.
Right.
Like we have some of the biggest databases, if, please Ancestry, help us out. That if we could get into those, we could solve a lot more, right? Just because of the population. And I believe a majority of the population wants to help with this. But then we have the specter of privacy, which I think is a little strange. I have my own standpoints, but the majority of people, the police handle data all day, every day, right? So we're used to this, protecting people and protecting personal identifying information and confidentiality. So I don't feel that it's a bad, thing if the law enforcement has access to it, because in reality, we have access to all kinds of stuff. We get people's phones, we get all, what I'm saying, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But so with it being terms and conditions, those companies set the rules. And in federal, right, when you get federal grant money or you get federal cases, like for the FBI or some of the federal agencies, they have the DOJ guidelines, right? Like we have the issue in the Koberger case too, that they went into a different database, what I've heard, okay? With or without the terms and conditions. So is that necessarily a legal thing? I'm not a lawyer, right? But that's a private company's terms and conditions. So is it allowed? Is it not allowed, right? That goes more to law enforcement policy and things like that. Now, does that endear the public to you? Right. And then I also think it's education on the public about what is really in there, because being a contributor myself, I think that people are really willing to help if they know that the information is being used responsibly. So,
Sure.
So I don't know if I answered that question correctly, but there's a lot of, that's just a very difficult subject. But I will go back. So what they've done is they've made changes to it where you have to manually opt in, right? You have to manually opt in and say, yes, I want to share my information.
Yeah. I was talking to a lady. I was at a benefit last night for the Tulsa Police Foundation, and that's an organization that basically gives money to the police department so we can buy big things like the MVAC, things like that. And I was talking to some of them, and I said, hey, I was just kind of entertaining. I was monopolizing the conversation, but I was like, hey, who here at this table, and there's a lot of money at this thing, believe me. I was like, who here at this table has submitted their DNA? And there was a few of them that said, yeah. And I said, all right, well, that's cool. Have you guys allowed for, there's specific sites that, or there was actually one of them says, oh, no, I don't want any part of that because I don't want to know. I don't want that to go into the law enforcement one. And the reason was, it was kind of puzzling to me. It was like, I don't want to find out that, oh my gosh, one of my relatives is a serial killer. And I'm thinking, well, I would want to know, but my point is, there are some database. They can opt for certain ones that are specific for the cops to look at, right? There's like 3 companies from what I've heard or something along those lines, 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. The big 2 is GEDmatch and FTDNA, right? So so there's like a universal thing that even like, let's just talk about Ancestry, 23andMe. Like when you take a test and you say, I want to be matched. So all your matches are in there within the database. Okay. Kind of like if you look at, I don't know why this popped in my head, but like a dating app, right? Okay. Like I want to meet all the people. So your matches are all the way in there, but then they filter it, right? So when you put it in there, you're looking for all your relatives. So you're going to match to all your relatives. So you're in there with all your relatives. And then if you want to help law enforcement, there's a filter. Okay. So it says, okay, in addition to seeing all your relatives, we're going to also share you over here, like behind this wall, so the cops can come in. So the cops don't see everybody that's over here. They see the people that have said yes and basically open the door, right? It's like a voluntary search. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I did want to say something too, and I think you'll appreciate this. Maybe this will help the public, because the privacy and the understanding, I like to try to relate it to normal things. In my training, when I teach this, about the neighborhood canvas, right? And I think hopefully not too many times, but people have experienced this when something has happened, whether they've been a victim or whether they've been a witness. You go and you do a neighborhood canvas. What did you see? Does this sound like anybody you know? You know, we got the posters and the post office and everything.
Mhm.
And people contribute information. Well, you know, that sounds like Tony down the street, or it looks like so-and-so. This is the same thing that we're doing with the DNA relatives, right? It's being done, not necessarily verbally, but it's being done inside the database. So it's the neighborhood canvas, pulling information from people that want to help and getting information about, you know, narrowing down, you know, does this look like somebody? And that's how it happens. So it's the same function. It's just done inside the computer. Same investigation.
Okay. Hey, where were you a cop? Where were you?
South Florida, and I worked for Sheriff Joe for a bit out here in Arizona.
What? Okay. Oh, Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Yes.
The one with the
pink underwear.
Yes, and green bologna sandwiches.
Pink handcuffs.
Yes. Oh yeah, he was one of the most. What was he like? I bet he was an interesting guy.
He's great. But I'm different. I may be a little blonde thing, but I'm kind of outspoken. I have my own, ideas about things. Like I love him, I love him. And it's a little different perspective. People all have their own personalities and everything. But when you're a cop, to have somebody that's going to back you and allow you to do what you need to do, and
yeah.
There's just nothing like it. It's like having a parent that supports you and says, yes, go be everything that you can be. Yeah,
that's right. I'm blessed. I work for a department that is exactly like that as well. And I hear that from others that it's not quite that way. Well, and you said you were a detective. What type of detective were you again?
Homicide, all kinds of major crime, sex crime.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so did that experience help you with this field?
I think absolutely, because one of the things when I teach the students, right, the cops and my civilian students alike, it's and some of the problems that I feel we see in the industry, because right now this is an external vendor type situation, right? And they don't have the law enforcement training. But cops, like, we go through a process of elimination. We will work a lead to the nth degree, right? We're going to eliminate every possibility. Mm-hmm. And that doggedness and that determination, the gut feeling, it all plays into it. And so having that investigative, the not backing down, the not giving up, the belief in DNA, right? Like I tell people, I don't care what the piece of paper says the person is. The DNA will always tell me who the person is. And that was one of the hardest things, though, when I was doing the genetic genealogy, because a lot of people come into it and they rely on the genealogy, the records, the birth certificates, death certificates, census, and things like that. And as cops, we rely on that, right? Those are the public records that say who this person is. Yeah. But no, because of all this, what I call shenanigans with the grandparents, like there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. People aren't who they say they are. And so it was a mindset shift for me to say, I'm not going to trust the document. I'm going to trust what the DNA says. And the DNA actually points you in the way. Like it's only one way. It can't be any other way.
Now, you said you wanted to touch upon the Kohlberger case, the Idaho case. So let's talk about that, because that one is probably, I'm going to say that's probably the biggest case currently in the United States, that's probably in the world, that's dealing with genealogy. If I'm right. And here's let me give you my perspective of what happened here. Okay. This is my thoughts without knowing all the details. So let's see how close I am, because you probably know a lot about this. I think that they found a little bit of DNA on that knife. There was a knife that was left behind, and they found a little bit of DNA belonging to somebody on it, which, by the way, just because there's DNA on an object or at a scene doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't tell you the time when a crime occurred. It just tells you that, if it's on a coffee table, well, there's a good likelihood that he was there at one point or another. So they find the DNA. This is what I'm guessing. They send it off to a forensic genealogist. She does whatever she's she or he does whatever they're doing. They send it off. Then they start finding people in a family. And then they start going, okay, well, who does this guy have his kids? Where are his kids at? And then they eventually end up finding, oh, we have this one that is this guy's son who happens to go to college. And lo and behold, he's a criminal justice student. Go figure. This isn't the first time we've had one of those that's trying to get into this field. And he happens to be driving a white car, which a white car was seen in the area at the time of this. And then they kind of went from there. That's what I'm guessing. It just fell into place. Is it? I mean, go on and you tell me what you want to tell me about it. But is that kind of it in a nutshell?
I don't necessarily know the particulars of the case, but the particulars, they are kind of interesting, right? So the stuff that's been released to the public, I am not consulting on that case, thank goodness. And I was telling my students, please, please, please let that not be the case where genetic genealogy comes to the forefront. And of course it was. What I find really interesting is, and I'd love your perspective on this, is it was going back and forth with the judge, and the prosecution was saying, well, it didn't provide a lead, like it's not a lead and we don't have to disclose it, which I thought was really kind of crazy. And then the judge ended up ruling, yes, you have to disclose it. And now they're just classifying it as a tip, right? So, with the confidential informant, right? Even with a confidential informant, they have to be trustworthy and reliable. And so now it seems, and again, I don't have all the details, that like both sides have stipulated that they're just going to say, oh, we got his name from a tip. Like it's not even coming into the case. And so I thought that was weird. And then the defense attorney was trying to defend it on the privacy issue, which is not the issue. But to your point, and this one, I think they also went into MyHeritage. Okay, so they placed it with a vendor, and whatever was going on with the matches or that, and they ended up giving it to the FBI. And the word is that they got permission. And that's as far as I know how that went. I don't know whose permission or whatever that was. But to the point that you said, so from what I understand, the little speck or whatever, what they're calling touch DNA. And if you watch the testimony and you look at the documents, they're even arguing about touch DNA, right? Because, touch, you can think, touch, you have to touch it, as opposed to what maybe we call like cast off, right? Because people don't realize, they talk about DNA privacy. You could tell them in a show how much DNA is just floating around from everybody just existing and riding in cars and touching things, right? So they're arguing about touch DNA when it may necessarily be cast off DNA, right? It could have been transfer DNA. And they really got into the wording of this, which I thought was interesting. But from what I understand, it's on the snap of the knife. And to your point, well, what if he rubbed against it in the store or something? What if, just because it's there doesn't mean that it was deposited how you think it was deposited. Mm-hmm. So
you're right.
I don't know how they would overcome that as a certainty. And sometimes you have cases, especially with a stabbing, which we think this is a stabbing, where the perpetrator gets sliced or something, and then you've got huge blood and things like that. That's a little bit easier to kind of tie to whatever. And it's funny, we didn't see a lot of that. Now they're also talking about that case that there's more blood and a glove outside or something. So, well, I don't know. I don't know how helpful it's going to be in that case. And maybe that's why they just agreed that they're going to call it a tip or something.
Yeah, you made me think of something when you were saying that, and there he is right there, the Idaho killer, or the suspected Idaho killer, I should say. Yes. And there's the victims, and just an absolute sickening tragedy. But I'll tell you, I'm actually surprised that they allowed for that house to be torn down, personally. I'm actually disgusted by it. I think that should have been available for a future jury to maybe do a walkthrough out, honestly.
Absolutely, because even me, and not that I'm better than anybody, but trying to follow what was articulated about what happened, what floor, the way the layout was.
Right.
Now this information about, where this other blood was, who was seen when, the time frame. I think that's going to be, and I'm not sure if the defense stipulated to that or not, but that's going to be a huge, yeah, I'm totally against that. That should have never been done. I don't care how, put some scaffolding around it or something, but that they should have never tore that down. But
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be critical of the Moscow Police Department, but this is a type of case that I don't care if it happened in Moscow, it happened in Tulsa, it happened in LA. That's a huge undertaking for any kind of a detective crew to deal with that type of a high pressure. The media went nuts, as you're well aware, and sometimes the media could be. It could hurt a case. I mean, really. And I think that the one thing about this case that stands out to me that just really kind of annoyed me throughout was that I think they were telling the family too much, and the family was immediately running to national media outlets and talking about everything that was being said, or a lot of it anyway, that was being said in it. And I thought that was really just kind of detrimental to this case, so to speak. But it's going to be interesting to see how this thing comes out at the end of the day, because I thought that they brought up some interesting questions that are, I have no doubt that it's probably going to, I'm going to guess that there's probably going to be some case law. It's going to go up. I think it's going to get appealed. I think there's going to be some substantial decisions that are going to be made as to how far that they can go with researching DNA in these databases, et cetera. But and I'm going to mention something else too. That I had heard, and maybe this is wrong, but I had heard that, I've heard, a word on the streets is that if they had access, if the police departments or law enforcement throughout this country had access to Ancestry.com, that if there was DNA on any of these cold cases, that it would probably solve about 95% of those cold cases, or at least provide a lead to where detectives would have a real good possibility, if that was the killer's DNA, that it would probably be able to be solved via forensic genealogy. Have you heard that at all? I've heard that from somewhere. I could have made it up in my sleep.
Well, no, I mean, I totally believe that. But then again, kind of what you mentioned about the law enforcement background, right? So there's some standards that I've heard in the industry, right? And this is me from my law enforcement experience versus the civilian, right? A lot of these genetic genealogists are civilians, and not knocking them, right? Because they want to help and do all this stuff. But they've come up with these thresholds about, okay, well, we're not going to work this below this. We're not going to do that. And that's where I'm saying, like coming from the dogged detective, if you've got a lead, you're going to work it. Like, you're not just going to give up on a lead, right? There's also something that they do a lot, which I don't agree with, is reference testing. And they send everybody all over creation doing reference testing, when the DNA will tell you, if you work the matches and you work the investigation, there's no need for reference testing, because, again, this is my opinion, you're endangering cops when you send them out to a house of somebody that they don't know, or somebody that's closely related to a potential suspect or whatever. There's horror stories. And so it's just working it. So yes, obviously Ancestry or My Heritage would make it much easier because we have a bigger population. Like, if everybody in the world was in CODIS, it would be a lot easier, right? We just don't have that population. But with the databases that we do have, you just have to work longer and harder. To your other point too about my 48-hour solve. No, they're not all like that, because sometimes you've got to really go to the nitty-gritty and you've got to work a lot of matches versus just a few matches. It takes you longer. You got to build a bigger tree because you've got a bigger, not a suspect pool, but you've got a bigger relative population that you just have to work. So yeah, it would be amazing. And there's other things that you can do legally and ethically that makes the work easy. And we'll just leave it at that. But it's not as big a hindrance, but I wish that they would allow it. I don't understand why they don't allow it, because I think with the technology that we have, especially if law enforcement is using the chain of custody properly and controlling the cases, to assure not only the company but the public, we're staying in our lane. I mean, like, if they knew all the information that you guys get on a daily basis, right? Like, there's nothing sacred, but we really need that population. Like, there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to clean these up. And it's defeating sometimes. It's defeating.
Well, you brought up something, and you coming from a detective background, I'm really interested in your response to this, because the only forensic genealogists that I've met were not law enforcement. I know that my boss is actually going through the training right now, and he says it's really tough. I mean, he's a smart guy, but he was saying, or basically what I've heard is that at least through that training, that 8-hour training. And the reason why I was going through that is that we had the Tulsa massacre that occurred here in Tulsa in 1921, where there was, just for the listener, in the event that you weren't aware of it, I recommend you Google the event, and there's a lot of pictures, and it's absolutely incredible, the devastation that happened in Tulsa back in 1921, where hundreds of people were killed, and then they were buried in mass graves. And so Tulsa, over the course of the last few years, they've actually been excavating some of these cemeteries, or one cemetery in particular, looking for remains, and they have found some, but not many, but they have found some. But my question is, and my point, I'm hoping I don't lose my train of thought. My point is. Oh, that's what it is. They were talking about, a lot of the forensic genealogists are not required to really provide a report of how that they got to where they arrived. And you being a police officer in the past, especially a detective, what is your opinion of that? Because from the casual person that's kind of ignorant to this field, and I'm trying to get more knowledge on it, what do you think about that? Should there be some documentation kind of showing how you got to where? And
absolutely. So I have some unpopular opinions in the industry, right? But I come from the background of the criminal justice system, having to do probable cause, chain of custody, and all that stuff, where we're working for the eventual prosecution. It's not a hobby. It's not a cute thing. It's not to get on TV. And it's not a hobby. It's a forensic process. I've worked cases. I had a case that came from a civilian vendor, and it didn't pass muster with the medical examiner because they did not articulate properly the identification. And when I was asked to go and fix it, and when I requested information, they weren't going to give the information. And it was almost to the point that we're going to get a subpoena. And they were saying, well, you can't give this information to the medical examiner. I'm like, yes, we can. We work with the medical examiner all the time. Like, they make the determination based on our information. So they, cops, again, this goes back to cops sharing information. Cops share information all the time. We safeguard and protect the information. So that whole thing had to be redone so it passed muster. And that's one of the things that I teach in my training, both on the law enforcement and the civilian side, getting prepared for court, because you have to have a report that's able to articulate it. I tell them, look, you're going to have a layperson, the jury, potentially, and they're going to have to read this. The prosecutor doesn't know it. The defense attorney doesn't know it. The jury probably doesn't know it. And you have to succinctly, go to the point and prove it and say, not necessarily the records, but here's the DNA, here's the science, and here's why, right? Like with fingerprints, ridge patterns, and bullet casings with, firing pins and striations and those sort of things. And so being able to articulate that properly, that is a huge problem. Just like sending cops to suspects' houses to take swabs,
right?
Like from the killer's house. We don't talk to anybody until the very end, right? We don't let loose of the case. Like, we know the question before we ask the question. And that's just a different perspective because they're not trained. And it does bother me because it's jeopardizing cases. And I say, unfortunately, it's going to come back to bite them. And we've seen some of that. Just thank goodness it hasn't been publicized. But that is a problem. And that's why, I started this focus to train the agencies to bring this inside. So, because I believe it's a law enforcement function. It is not, even though it's forensic, it's not a lab function. It's a law enforcement investigative function. It's like the DUI, where in a DUI investigation, this is my analogy. In a DUI investigation, you're doing all the street thing. You're watching the car, it's weaving, it's doing this stuff. You're doing the nystagmus, field sobriety test, and then you send the blood to the lab, right? So the output, the genetic output is one portion of it, but there's a whole investigation, court prosecution, and things like that goes with it. So I have some unpopular opinions, but and this too, like somebody was saying this to me, I had an agency with an unknown human, and I was talking to this to one of my assistants, retired cop, and they were talking about the unknown humans. Well, in the law enforcement world, everything is a homicide until it isn't. And I had one agency where we had an unknown human remains case, and they were kind of like, it's just a dead person. I said, no, it's not just a dead person. Well, we don't know it's a homicide because, sometimes you only have pieces of bones, right? So if you don't have cut marks or soft tissue or anything like that, you can't really tell. And they were saying, well, it's just a dead person. I said, well, how do you know it's not a homicide? You have to treat everything like a homicide, like, right? Remember that? Right. Like in academy? Right. And they're like, well, no, it's just a dead person. I said, well, you don't know that until you identify the person, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happens if you start out with that wrong assumption, you can't rehabilitate the case sometimes. So it's a very fine line. It's a very fine line. Right. Yeah.
Now, I don't want to miss this. Let's talk about that case that you're most known for. Okay. And start out with how you even got involved in it, and tell us how you were able to be successful with it.
Yeah. So this is when I was living up in northern Nevada, up by Lake Tahoe, and met at a law enforcement event, met some of the sheriff's office personnel. And of course, I have this newfangled thing. And I said that, this is really great. And everybody, you guys need to use it. And do you have any cases? And so we were having a training session, and they had actually sent off on the case. It's one that Danny helped us on that one from, he was Intermountain, right? Now he's DNA Labs, I think they merged. Danny.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, Danny, that you work with on the Tulsa. Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I'm sorry. Yeah,
he helped us on that case. And so we did that, and we got the DNA back. And
because doesn't he have a lab like in Utah or something? I think that's where he's at. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and that's important too, getting good results, right? Because sometimes you only get one crack at it, right? And it can be expensive. But yeah, so we got the results back. And when I started doing the work on it, we had one part of the family, we'll just say was a demographic that can be kind of confusing, a lot of matches, very hard to sort out. And then on the other side, we didn't really have any matches at all, but it was more European, more easily read. And I actually, through using 2 matches, and I went with the haplogroup. Okay, so folks that don't know what the haplogroup is, us as humans, we carry a little bit of DNA that gets handed down on our maternal side from mom to daughter, to daughter, to daughter, to daughter, to daughter. And the same on the dad's side, from father to son, to son, to son. And they have like naming conventions, and they're called haplogroups. And so when I was presented with the situation, I immediately started trying to work the maternal side, and it was just a mess. Some type similar names, huge population, low matches. And this is where being strategic in your implementation of the investigation, I was like, okay, this is going to waste too much time. I'm going to move over here. And when I moved over there, I said, hey, do we have a haplogroup? And I happened to find we had 2 matches. I sorted by the haplogroup. We had 2 matches. And because in this case, males and females, if it's a female, it's a female up the line, and a male in this case was up the line. I was able to build those 2 matches families up, and I knew it had to be an offspring down from them. And so I quickly was able to build the offspring down and found where that family married into the other family. And so the identification was made. And
was it a homicide?
No, it was actually a suicide, and the gentleman had wandered off, and they didn't know what happened to him. And this was kind of, I hate to be, I don't want to be disrespectful, right? I try to manage this in talking about these victims and these families. That's why I don't get into names or anything too much. But it was really interesting in this case because, and I talk about following the science, right? So when I narrowed it down, I knew it had to be a male. I knew the age range, the estimated age range, and there were only 2 brothers in this family, and one was alive and one was already reported deceased. And so in this case, we had a missing person, right? Not a deceased person, but a missing person. And I remember like one whole night I sat at my desk and I'm like, I know it's here. I know it has to be one of these 2, right? My gut and the science was telling me it's right here. But I'm like, I don't have a person. The records, the genealogy was telling me no, because one's alive. I see him on Facebook doing live videos. And the other one is like dead and buried. And so I said, okay, I think, how can I be wrong? I was really struggling with it. And I said, my gut's right. And I called the detective and I said, okay, I know I'm right, but somehow I'm wrong. Like, I don't know what to do. And here's what we have. And we ended up calling the brother, and the brother said, no, he's not dead. He wandered off, and this is what happened. And we were able to move the brother's DNA over, and bing, bam, boom. The next day, there it was. And that was it. And the family was just incredibly wonderful, which is very personal to me. Having been through this and not knowing who I was or whatever. And when you think nobody to help, and they were just very, very, there's nothing like it. I cannot tell you, in all the things that I've seen and done in my career, there's nothing like this.
Yeah. I think that, well, you definitely can provide answers for people. At least you can provide, so they're not sitting there wondering, you're able to confirm different things and so forth. So it's amazing how quick you were able to do that. And I'm sure that that's not an every time deal for sure. Because some of these families, just like you said, are crazy as far as the, really complicated. Plus,
yeah, no, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's being able to read the tea leaves, so to speak, and knowing when you have a problem, right? Like when it's not lining up on paper, knowing when you have to go look for somebody. And that's kind of what happened in my case, right? So my father and everything, it wasn't a formal marriage. Same thing with my grandmother, with my mom. It wasn't a formal marriage, right? So there wasn't a listed, there wasn't a listed offspring. So it's like a phantom that you're chasing. And this is where you have to get confident and know the science. When it's telling you that there has to be a child there, then there has to be a child there. You just have to find it. And that's where making up the scenarios, like, well, what could it have been? And, 2 people had to get together. So it must have been this family and this family. And then I don't immediately, like you mentioned, I don't immediately go to location, but, at the end of it, kind of like, when you have an offense, you're like, who was here? Right. Like, so then I'll go and I'll start looking at, who was in the right place at the right time. Right. But yeah, a majority of the time, like I said, shenanigans with the grandparents. Okay. So you'd be so surprised how messed up people's families are, and they have no idea.
You mean like, well, give me an example.
Well,
like, like uncle hooking up with, I'm sure there's a lot of, family trees that don't have a lot of branches that you run across from time to time.
well, no, but I'll tell you, like, even in my law enforcement classes, we've got 25, 50 people in there, and there's at least 2 people that have like a random, I don't know who this is, where did this person come from? Like it is way more common than you think.
Wow. Is there,
Yeah.
and there's some populations somewhere in different places in the world where there's a lot of, I don't think that, what is it?
Endogamy?
Okay. And tell me what that means again.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. I come from Florida. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically like there's some incestuous.
Yeah. We could call it,
things
endogamy, right? Intermarriage within the families and different things. Yes.
Okay.
And different
All right.
populations just historically. Yeah. So there's all kinds of challenges. And when I say read the tea leaves, that's what's so important. Like you gain your confidence. It's like reading body language, right? When you're out on the street and you're reading body language and you know when something's about to go down, when you read the tree and you know the DNA, like you almost know what you're looking for because it shows itself.
Yeah.
It shows itself. Yeah.
So I'm just, I'm still trying to figure out what it is and how you do it, but you basically, do you have ability to get on certain sites to where hospitals allow you to, is there a HIPAA thing, or do they allow you to basically look at birth certificates and stuff like that? Is there historical sites that you can utilize?
No, there's enough information that's out there. Like I said, it's really not the record. So what happens is we get the matches in.
Okay.
And we concentrate on the highest matches, right? That's the highest probability. So for folks that don't understand how genetic genealogy is done, I see a question. Yes, you can take DNA from the deceased. We can talk about that, but yeah. So there's relationships and there's measurements, if we want to call it distance in relationships. So a parent and a child share about 3,500 centimorgans. Okay. And I call it's the reverse ruler of relativity, right? So usually a centimorgan closer to you is smaller, right? If we measure in centimeters, centimeters closer to you is lower number. In centimorgans, farther, the higher number is closer to you. So a parent is about 3,500, parent, child, and these relationships are all mapped out with suggested relationships based on a numerical value. And that's how my aunt, who should have shown up at a certain number, ended up being half that number. And so these relationships have, their numerical values, kind of like the periodic table, if you think about it, right? So they all have their numeric values. And when you get the matches, you figure out who those people are, you build the family, and you place the people in the matches in that family. And I call it the genetic positioning system. You can literally navigate 2 blocks up and 4 blocks over within the family and know where that person is supposed to be. That's why I'm telling you, like, I don't care who they are on paper. The child or the person that you're looking for, the relative, has to be there. And that's it. And then you go on a hunt for it. And so you build all these little family pieces, and then you put it together and you narrow down and you hone it in, and you get your possibles, right? Like your suspect pool. I call it person of interest, right? Because it could be a bio relative or it could be a suspect. Yeah.
Wow. It's interesting. So, Amanda, throw up that picture where I put the 4 books up there. Let's throw that up. And I want to, these are your books. You've written them. Tell me briefly which each one of these books kind of is the synopsis of what we're talking about on these.
My goodness. So, well, what I did, the reason is because we have to get funding for our agencies so that we can do this on a routine basis. And I was like, okay, how can I raise money? Like, how can I just get money and not beg, give people something of value? And I had always wanted to write a book. And so so those books are all, it's kind of progression. You might recognize some characteristics in the characters, but it starts with concrete clues. That's on the left.
Okay.
And it goes all the way to the right. So, concrete clues. Well, what I did was I took real cases of unknown humans that were very interesting to me. And so I used the details, not the actual case, out of respect for the people. And I created a fictional story using the details, making it as interesting as I could. Later books are better than the first. It's not a Pulitzer Prize. And then I walked through the investigation with the fictional characters and everything. I made up stories of who the people were and their family and everything. And so the cases are solved throughout the story. So Concrete Clues, very personal to me. It's about a woman that washed up, still unidentified. All of them are unidentified as I know it, washed up in the beach in the Clearwater area. Off the Rails, obviously train going Chicago to Nevada. Fabric of Deceit. That unfortunately in the jean bag, the denim bag, is a child. An Ancient History involves some remains and high school.
Okay,
So,
very good. And
yeah.
they're available on Amazon. So if you wanted to get those, and for the person that's sitting and they're listening to this, and by the way, we're with Christine Burke. She's a forensic investigative genetic genealogist. And so that's who we're here. Episode number 56, by the way, Christine, 56.
Okay.
Epic episodes, and you're no exception. So how does somebody, if they're sitting at home and they want to get involved in this and they want to become you, they want to become a forensic genealogist, where would they need to start? Where do they need to go?
Well, they need to get training. Okay. So they can get training anywhere. They can take my classes. They can go, University of New Haven has training. Boston University has some training. Ramapo College has some training. Or if you feel that you have the skills, you might just need to add the other component. Like I teach about the law enforcement perspective and things like that. They can also reach out to me. I can talk to them about their particular situation and point them in the right direction. But yeah, people shouldn't be intimidated. We have a great population of folks that have learned this, and people that are very dedicated, people that are transitioning. Maybe they have a lot of experience in genealogy and they want to add the DNA component to it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and it's just getting the proof and building the cases. You got to get the experience in building the cases.
And I'm seeing a question out there, and I think it's Steph. No, it isn't actually, Steph. It's Amanda. Is this for cops only? And the answer is no. You don't have to be a cop to do this. And how can civilians get involved? Well, that's it. She's just telling you how that happens and how civilians can get involved in this. And furthermore, just for cops that are out there, you might want to even try going to your administration and saying, hey, I would like to do this. And your department might actually pay for you to go and become a forensic genealogist to where you can do it on the side and just kind of help with some of these cases, especially in a smaller department. I think that would be ideal, really.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the goal, to bring it in-house so we can secure the investigations and I mean, you could just clear so many cases, right? At the cost of what the vendors are being paid to have somebody in-house that can do it. Yeah.
What's the cost of something like this for somebody, from ground zero where they're beginning to literally get to that? I know it's going to take time, but what would something like that cost for somebody to actually get certified as a forensic genealogist at the end of the day?
Well, it depends on where they go. Okay. It ranges from, and I don't want to quote people's prices, but in the teen thousands. Okay. My courses are a lot cheaper. I donate a lot of training to law enforcement. As a matter of fact, law enforcement gets trained for $1,000. Okay. That's my giving back. Okay. For everybody that we've lost. Yes. But yeah, so there's options out there for anything. Anybody that wants to talk about whatever they need. You don't need some people can't get into programs because they don't have this experience or that experience. That's why I created my program, because nobody should be precluded from doing this if they want to help, right? And where there's a will, there's a way. I'm happy to talk to anybody, but there's a lot of options. Well, I can't say there's a lot of options. There's New Haven, there's Boston, and there's Ramapo. And then I have a class. But I'm always happy to talk to somebody and see, and definitely talking about your detectives and stuff. This is a career change, especially I talk about for the guys on the street. You want to get into D Bureau? Like this is the way to do it, right? And many folks can go and start a paid career, or they can go and volunteer at their agency. Like there's a lot of cold case divisions in police departments that are starting now. So many opportunities. I mean, if you just think about it there, I think I looked at the number. I want to say there's 15,800 and some unidentified humans, just unidentified humans.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like how are we ever going to get that taken care of? That's a crazy number. And it goes up. When I first started, it was 14,000.
Yeah, that's nuts. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I've always I really wish that I had the ability to make this happen. And I've talked about it, and maybe we will one day. But I think that when people die and they go to the medical examiner's office, they should have their DNA taken, period. It just should be an automatic. And
somebody else is saying that. Yes.
I mean, the amount of cold cases just based on that alone could be epic.
Okay. But I will tell you, I've got cases now with the ME, some of these cases that are in NamUs, which NamUs, I don't know if it's NamUs.gov or whatever it is, but NamUs, that's where these unidentified humans are missing persons. And believe it or not, we've got deceased people that are identified and are not claimed. It's awful what has happened to these people. But the medical examiner, here's another problem. They're not maintaining DNA. They're not maintaining samples so that we can identify these folks.
Yeah.
So that needs to be done too. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in all this, but I'm really excited.
Awareness. Thank you for doing this. We need to raise awareness. There's so much help needed. Yes. Yeah,
there really is. And I've been a homicide detective for 16 years. And to tell you the truth, and even though I went through that 8-hour training, I haven't even scratched the surface. This is an area that needs to be talked about more. I think it needs to be more standardized. There needs to be, who am I to say? But I think that there needs to be more of the kind of the national standard. And I wanted to ask this real quick. You can work a case no matter where. I mean, anywhere in the country, if somebody reached out to you from Maine, you would work it, right? You're not held by the boundaries of the United States.
No, absolutely. Interpol is actually, I had a student from South Africa. I have students from Australia. But no, it's Interpol is getting involved. And like this is, if I can say one thing, and I love this event, if I can say one thing to your cops, please, chiefs, sheriff, you have to have this. You have to have this. And if I have to go before your city council or your county commissioners or whatever, I will tell them how important and game-changing this is, okay? When you have a detective that is trained, you cut out, you can get DNA testing as cheap as, which is not cheap, but in the scheme of things, $600, and work the investigation in-house. You can clear way more than the $25,000 and all this stuff. Like the cost benefit analysis of bringing this in-house is, community relation. Like, please, I beg of you, this is the most amazing thing ever. Please, please, please. I'm happy to talk to anybody about how we can get this done.
Yeah, and I've seen something, retiree, you're younger, maybe you have a disability, maybe you...
I've got a person just came out of the class 74, another person 70. I got people 22. Retirees, like everybody, they say, I always wanted to be a PI. I always wanted to be a cop. I didn't think I could ever do this. And it's about people that just have a desire to help others and a tenacity and it's exciting. It is fun. I feel almost, bad about saying that, but it's so fun to do something, and the reward is, yeah.
Oh, it's like when I figure out a case, and you have too, but it's like that. It's that adrenaline where, oh my gosh, it just fell into place, and how exciting that is. I mean, yeah, I think that's cool. So how long does this take from the beginning to, I'm sure that it's probably somewhat self-paced to an extent, right? Or is there
There's different levels. I have a course. I'm releasing a new course, 12 weeks. Like, you just have to learn to read the science, and that's it. And then you have to get your proof. Some programs are a year. Like, it's just, you have to understand how to read the DNA and read the tree, and then you're good.
Yeah. My cousin Darren's in here from the state of Washington. Darren, you're retired. This would be a great gig for you. It'd be fun. Yes. You could be a part of this. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, and really, I think this would be interesting for anybody that just is looking for that something that might just occupy, even if you're retired, what a cool hobby this would be. And so, all right. Well, I love this. I think this is great. I appreciate you very much, Christine.
I appreciate you and everybody that's here. Thank you so much for helping.
I think that
help. They all need our help.
That's right. She is very available
Thank you, Darren.
to email and so forth. And I have no doubt that I think that she would be an absolutely great choice to start. I don't know where you were up by Lake Tahoe, but I used to live by there too. I've got relatives that live in Washoe Valley, or that's where they live.
I was in Minden.
Okay. Yeah. So they still live up there. That's the only other whites that exist in my family. So, but anyway, so that's cool. And, but anyway, so nevertheless, I want to thank everybody for being here. I really do. And I hopefully you guys have enjoyed this content. This is such a huge area. She could have talked about this stuff for days and if months. It's really deep. I mean, how much we could have talked about, but I wanted to cover as much of the various areas as possible. So get her book, check it out. If you're interested, I think that would be a great start to just kind of grab a book and start reading about it and see if this is something that really might interest you. How about if you have a criminal background? Does that preclude somebody from being involved in this occupation?
Nope. Oh, if you have a criminal background? Well, it depends, right? So people can help people. You could probably speak to more about that, about the law enforcement standards, right? Like, and that's something too, you have to think about being exposed to, like we talked about civilian versus law enforcement, being exposed to a suspect pool, and what if there's a conflict, and what do you do about that? So I don't know how to answer that, right? What's going to happen in court? We need to think about impeachment and, going down the line. But I'm sure they could help in some fashion. And there's plenty of people that, like me, who don't know who they are, that need help too. They could be a search angel or something like that. There's a huge need.
Oh, a search angel. What is that?
So those are people that volunteer to help people find their biological family. People. So when the DNA test says, and you're going, they help, because people are intimidated working with law enforcement, right? They're intimidated. There's a lot of things like you talked about, court reports, chain of custody, all that stuff, dead bodies and things. So some people like doing it just for biological family. And there's people like me, like I said, there's so many people that are what I call the walking wounded that you don't even know that have had this happen within their family, and they need help to figure out who they are, adoptions, things like that. So there's always room. You go look on Facebook or whatever and type in search angel, and those people, if you know genealogy or whatever, you could start practicing with that. You don't need a formal thing.
Yeah, I really love this. I think this is great. This is certainly an option for so many people that want to get their hands into something like this, and you can make money. I mean, I don't know that you're gonna get super rich, but you're certainly, this is ground floor time. What a great time to get involved in this type of a deal. How many forensic genealogists exist in this country, roughly? There's probably not even a great database on that, but do you have any idea as to how many there are across the country?
I have no idea, and how they would even classify themselves. But this is, you're right, and that's what I tell people too. Like this is the ground floor, and there's plenty of work, and eventually, and actually, California's been doing really great with this, right? They've really done a lot with this. But every agency is going to need, right? This is going to be a civilian position, right? Like an analyst to help the detective, right? Obviously the detective's not going to be building trees all day. You guys got to go out and do the habeas grabus, but, to have, one or two or three analysts in the police department, but just building trees and monitoring matches and doing things like that. Like you guys need to staff for this, police chiefs and sheriffs. Like it's doable. Okay.
Yeah.
So plenty of opportunity.
All right. Is there anything else that you want to mention that I did not say, or anything that you would like to add to this that we haven't covered? Because we can give you as much time as you want.
Was I ever on a TV show about people reuniting with bio parents? I was not, although I was on a different TV show, but no.
Well, wait a second. Hang on. There's a story there. What do you mean a different TV show?
I was on Investigation Discovery.
Oh, okay. For what? What was the case?
Missing person case. It was a gentleman. He was not a child, but he was, a young adult that was missing out of San Francisco, and unfortunately met a sad demise. So that didn't turn out so well. But yeah.
And let me ask you one other question that just popped into my brain.
I'll answer any questions. Go ahead.
I know the JonBenet Ramsey case just drives me crazy. That case is, they had, and I don't know what the level of DNA. I'm sure that it's not of great quality. Otherwise, I would have thought that they would have tried forensic genealogy, because there's 3 areas from what I understand, and I don't expect you to know the ins and outs of this case. But from what I understand, there's 3 areas that
watched the documentary.
Yeah, and I'm sure it crossed your mind while you were watching it, probably like it did mine. If they've got DNA that is the same source on the garrote, on her panties, and on her thigh, I think there was 3 areas that was the same source. They believe it's the same person. Why not? Is there? I mean, the way we're making advances, and they're able to build DNA as far as, I don't know the correct term.
Amplification. Mm-hmm.
Yes, they're able to do things like this.
Yeah.
I would think that, my gosh, that would be a perfect thing to do forensic genealogy on that type of a case.
So it's really hard, and when I talk about the things, I don't want to cop bash. I don't want to re-victimize the victims. But that in my head, like, I don't know what the answer is, right? And some of the things too, here again, I want to talk about the chiefs and the sheriffs and the cops, like this is a whole community thing. There is so much bad community, like the cops don't need another bad rap. Like, why would you not attempt it? Like, that's the same question I ask. But then again, they know stuff that we don't know, right? We don't want to be Monday morning quarterbacked, so we can't do it to them.
And they may have, maybe it came up to that.
Maybe they had nothing. Maybe they couldn't, but why wouldn't you just answer it? Like, it's just not a good look. But yeah, so that's another one we'd like to have resolved. Yeah. So, and if can I just do a last PSA? If you've done your DNA and had it tested, please consider opting in. Please consider opting in. And if somebody, God forbid, reaches out to you on one of these platforms and they're just asking questions about their family, if you would consider please helping them out, because there's just a lot of people, like, if it wasn't for 1 or 2 good people that really helped me figure out who I was, I'm so eternally grateful to them. So just please consider, so many people say, well, we already have our family. We don't need another person in the family. I'm like, well, I don't have any of my family. I don't know my family. So I'm trying to get family. So please help me. So just consider that, and consider opting in to the law enforcement databases so that we can resolve more of these cases.
Yeah, mention those databases one more time, the ones that are the law enforcement ones.
GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, ftdna.com.
Are they both free for people to opt into those?
I know FTDNA is doing something with my hedge. I think they're free for uploads. And then the opt-in, when you put your DNA in there should be a front little toggle. On GEDmatch, it's like a little pencil. On FTDNA, it's like a little toggle that you allow, because the default, and this is for people too that don't know, when all this happened, they defaulted everybody off. So if you initially were helping, you might have been toggled off and not know it. So that might be something you want to go check, right? So because you have to actively opt in for the law enforcement matching. That would be fabulous, because it only takes one match. It only takes one match and you have the answer.
Yeah, and you didn't mention this, but from what I've heard also is that they don't have to have everybody in this country to opt into this. They're going to hit a point at some point when they get enough people in that have opted into this, that they're going to hit that pivot point where everybody they're going to be able to. It's like everybody's in it. I mean, is that right? I mean, basically, they're going to have so many people in there that at some point in time, it's like having access to Ancestry.com or all these other ones. And I see you're sitting there thinking about it, so maybe I heard wrong. But
no, but I mean, I'm just, because like with just my family, not too many matches. Like I go all the way back to King Richard, right? So that's the thing that I'm saying. Like depending on how far you want to work it, you don't need a very close match. Like I believe there was a case in Florida where the suspect had actually hit on the suspect because he had put himself in there, right? So you don't need a real close match. You just need, like, if I came to you and you had it open, like sexual assault, homicide, or with nothing, right? And so we get the DNA, you've got a deceased person, you have no description, you have no video, you have no nothing, you just have a poor dead person and the DNA, okay? And you have nothing. And if I come back to you and I can say, John Smith is the great, great, great grandparent, how huge is that? Like, that's huge.
yeah.
Then you say, well, who is that person? Where were they living? What are their kids? That's your neighborhood canvas. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all you need is one name or one surname, and you're off to the races. This is how crazy it is. You don't have to narrow it down. You just need the relatives.
Yeah. And what family? Most families don't mind sitting down and going, oh, yeah. Then there was this one, he had these two kids, and matter of fact, that one kid, boy, he was a handful. And then he had these two kids that were in and out of jail all the time. Where were they in jail? And then you can go to just from there. And it's unbelievable probably what you can come up with based on that. Probably a lot of real life Jerry Springer episodes. So anyway.
Yes. So thank you. Yes.
Hey, listen, I appreciate you, Christine. It's been an honor. I really have appreciated you coming on here, and I think this is an epic episode. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I want to remind everybody, next week I'm going to have a repeat of some sort, because I don't want to bring a guest on July 4th. Number one, nobody's going to watch because they're doing other things, holiday stuff. But I will certainly have an episode that will air in case somebody wants to watch one. I want to remind people that you can catch all of my episodes. Christine, I'm going to send you the link to this tonight. But if you wanted to watch all of my episodes, you can go to my Detective Jason White YouTube page. You can watch them all right there. I don't have my Facebook one on there, but just type in Detective Jason White for my Facebook page. And Christine, I don't make any money to do any of this stuff. I'm not opposed to making money, but I'm not making any money. It's just there for the viewers to check out and to increase their knowledge base. And that's what I love about you, is that you're moving mountains. And that's exactly the type of guest that I want on here that is making the criminal justice world even better. So nevertheless, thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Remember to like and subscribe. And Christine, don't get off here just yet. I'm going to holler at you out on the backside. Everybody, thanks you again, for real. If you have any questions for her, don't hesitate. And you really should consider I'm actually considering it as I'm sitting here, Christine. I'm sitting here thinking maybe I need to do this on the side too. You know what I mean? And at least have that knowledge and that ability to be able to be intelligent, or at least more intelligent in that field. It would help me as a homicide detective, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. Once again, keep Phyllis in your prayers, and we're really sorry, and that our heart goes out to her and her family. So next week, repeat. The week after that, I'm gonna show Bobby Zigmont. Bobby Zigmont is a Tulsa police officer, and he is going to talk about some stuff that we're doing here with de-escalation and things along that line in the policing world, which is kind of it's really what we're doing now. So he's going to talk about that, and then more great, exciting episodes. And until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Buy her book, by the way, too. Check out her book. It's on Amazon. She's got 4 to choose from. And so until then, ladies and gentlemen, reach out to me on my Facebook page, my YouTube page, my Instagram, Twitter, whatever, or X. You can talk to me, and I actually answer back. So as long as it's nice.
He does.
Yes, I do. And last night, and I'm on LinkedIn also. But by the way, last night I had an episode that was one of my cases. So if you didn't catch that, you can go back and watch that somewhere. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. I could just ramble on. I'm going to spare everybody. Thank you all. Have a great week. Have a great holiday next week. Take us out, Amanda.